Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Some MPs on the government benches seem to think they were actually speaking in the first debate. And while they are still clinging to the idea of a post-Brexit fairy tale, other MPs from right across the UK have highlighted the chaos caused by Brexit itself and the lack of preparation for the end of the transition period. It isn't just that Scotland rejected Brexit, but it's also that the UK government have made such a complete búrach of implementing it. In the run-up to the 2019 election, the Prime Minister repeatedly boasted he had an oven-ready deal, and despite this clearly not being the case, refused to extend the transition period, even in the middle of a pandemic. While the government spent millions on adverts telling everyone to get ready for Brexit, there was precious little information on exactly what to get ready for. The necessary IT systems were only launched in December, and the government have now had to delay the start of their own customs and border checks for imports. While this gives an additional grace period for importers, it puts UK exporters at a huge disadvantage to their European competitors. It's clear the government is hoping to blame the impact of Brexit on COVID, but recent ONS data shows a much greater fall in post-transition exports to the EU than during the first COVID lockdown last spring. January saw a 50% drop in the export of dairy products, a 59% drop in meat, and a staggering 83% fall in seafood exports to Europe. Seafood is the biggest UK food export and is dominated by the Scottish fishing industry. Having actually taken the trouble to read the fisheries section of the trade deal at Christmas, it was clear to me that there was little movement of quota from EU to UK fishermen for most species. And with no ability to swap quota with EU counterparts, Scottish fishermen would actually be able to catch less popular species like cod and haddock. The Prime Minister claims his deal is both tariff-free and avoids all non-tariff barriers. But I think most exporters, including skippers and fish processors in my constituency, would beg to differ. Our local catch is dominated by lobster and langoustine, 85% of which goes to EU customers. In January, the chaos made it almost impossible to export fresh or live seafood to Europe, and most local skippers had to just stop fishing, as they were already paying to freeze fish they couldn't get to market. Despite boats being tied up for weeks in the harbour, the UK government have made eligibility for their compensation scheme so narrow, most won't qualify for any financial support. Even now, exports are taking 3 days instead of 1, and many exporters are getting less than half their normal prices. Some on the East Coast have resorted to landing their catch directly into Denmark to cut out export delays. Unfortunately, this also cuts out the onshore fishing sector, such as fish markets, processors and exporters. The Paymaster General said she is looking for solutions to Brexit problems. Can I gently suggest that the UK government reconsider their decision to turn down a veterinary agreement with the EU, and thereby they might reduce the sanitary and phytosanitary checks which are causing border delays? The Prime Minister's understanding may not be too clear, but this is exactly what is meant by non-tariff barriers. Food and drink are not the only products to be affected. Leaving the European Aviation Safety Agency has already impacted on pilots and is now increasing costs for aerospace companies. European customers who do not yet accept UK Civil Aviation Authority certificates, global customers don't recognise them either and expect EASA certification. Intertech, an aerospace company in my constituency, has had to establish an office in Ireland to maintain its EASA design organisation approval, as well as EASA registration costing £3,800 per year. They've now had to pay over £11,000 to register with the CAA and face paying another £11,000 every year in exorbitant annual fees, 3 times those of EASA. With the aerospace industry suffering from the impact of the pandemic, it's hard to understand how the government think these businesses can survive, let alone thrive, in the UK. Such manufacturers are also exposed to the Prime Minister's other great fallacy, that there are no tariffs in the UK-EU trade deal. Even a cursory perusal of the section on rules of origin shows that manufacturers such as aerospace or electronics, which use a high proportion of non-UK components, will face tariffs when they export their finished goods into the EU. In addition to the direct harm of Brexit, it is being used as an excuse to undermine devolution. The UK Internal Market Act can now be used to force lower food safety and environmental standards on Scottish consumers, while a return to direct rule on infrastructure spending means UK ministers, rather than the Scottish Government, would get to decide about Scotland's priorities. This could result in Scotland's infrastructure budget being squandered on a white elephant of a tunnel to Northern Ireland, despite the lack of political support in either country or any evidence of economic benefit. For Northern Ireland, the problem is not with the ferries, but the Brexit bureaucracy which is inherent in the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement. Brexit is a litany of broken promises, from claiming there would be little impact on trade, there would be no change for EU citizens, or even last January, the Prime Minister promising young people that the UK would stay in the Erasmus scheme. The loss of freedom of movement undermines Scotland's attempt to deal with the demographic challenge of an ageing population and creates workforce issues right across the UK in public services. There's already been a 90% drop in EU nurses coming to the UK, while the Home Office's health and care visa doesn't even cover all care workers. The government's hard Brexit bears little resemblance to the sunny uplands eulogised in 2016 and makes a mockery of the promise made during the Scottish independence campaign: vote no to stay in the EU. The other broken promise was that Scotland is an equal partner in a family of nations. Well, that hasn't held up very well, as we saw the 2016 compromise proposal from the Scottish Government dismissed within weeks. The Prime Minister has treated Scotland's wishes and interests with contempt and is already boasting that he plans to ignore the democratic will of the Scottish people. MPs from other parties have criticised SNP support for the EU, but that just suggests they haven't looked at the difference between the two unions. The outcome of the vote, which happened earlier this afternoon, and that which will happen at the end of this debate, serve to illustrate how even a clear majority of Scottish MPs are simply overruled in this place. This contrasts with the EU, where countries work as partners and are involved in making decisions. I believe it is only as sovereign nations in their own right that the countries of the UK could avoid having decisions like Brexit forced on them against their will, and could instead choose to work together on common goals. It is only with independence that Scotland and the other UK nations will ever be equal partners on these islands.